This is August of 2021, and I'm on my way to Maine to spend a week at a campground in Ellsworth. But I'll be staying at a couple of campgrounds along the way because it's a long drive up to Ellsworth in northern Maine. My first stop is Exeter Elms Campground here in Exeter, New Hampshire. We're having a heat wave, and luckily I was able to get a spot here early and stay 3 days instead of 1. So I can plug in my air conditioner and just relax in the van until the heat wave ends. Here's my campsite. Very nice. Surrounded by trees for privacy. Brand new electrical. It has 50 amp, 30 amp, or 20 amp. So they can put any kind of rig or tent camper in this spot. Other places I've been to, the campsite is either 50 amp or 30-20 amp. I paid 10 extra per night to be by the river, and I think it's well worth it. This was a very pleasant stay here. The air conditioning worked well. My only complaint is the cell service, which was spotty. It worked about 60% of the time. When you camp alone, you don't want to be cut off from the world. Watching my shows gives me comfort. Luckily, I have hundreds of hours of TV shows and movies on a hard drive, but I do like to watch the news and plan my sightseeing, which requires the internet, especially when I'm stuck inside during a heat wave. We're going to explore downtown Exeter, New Hampshire.
Turn right at the stop sign.
Exeter was the capital of New Hampshire during the Revolutionary War. Reverend John Wheelwright bought this land from a native tribe after being kicked out of Puritan, Massachusetts for sharing some radical religious ideas. This guy looks like the town eccentric. Then a grist mill and a sawmill were established, and it grew from there. The historic building that's reflected on this window is the Gilman Garrison House, built in 1709. The Gilmans were the most prominent family in Exeter from the colonial era, and they built sawmills on the Squamscott River, which is right behind this Italian restaurant. The Gilman House is now a museum. This town had a substantial black population at one time. They earned their freedom by fighting in the Revolutionary War. This brick building was called the Eagle Steamer House, which was the fire department in the 1800s. Recently it was a fancy restaurant, but it didn't survive COVID. This town is the home of the Phillips Exeter Academy, which is one of the most prestigious boarding schools in the world. That school used the Harkness method of teaching because the school was heavily funded by the Harkness family, which was the Standard Oil Harknesses that owned Taylor Swift's house in Rhode Island, that crazy widow that I made a video about. Mark Zuckerberg attended the academy, as did Gore Vidal, Robert Todd Lincoln, son of the president, Andrew Yang and Tom Steyer, who recently ran for president, Daniel Webster and President Franklin Pierce attended the academy. So a lot of influential and well-known people walk the streets of this little town. That's the original town hall, built in 1855. Today it's used for public meetings, plays, and other civic events. This is the Exeter Bandstand, where the Exeter Brass Band still plays every summer, and have been since 1847. The somewhat large black community that resided in Exeter after the Revolutionary War disappeared by 1800. The influx of white European and French Canadian immigrants was more readily accepted and were given the jobs that the blacks had, so they eventually moved away to cities that were less racist than these small towns tend to be. I drove through this downtown area on Sunday afternoon to get to the campground, and these streets were packed with tourists. This building was built in 1809, and this style of architecture is called Federal. It was known as the Sullivan Sleeper House, and I was wondering if sleeper house was another term for hotel. But the house was owned by the Sullivan family and then owned by a man named Otis Sleeper. And this part of the structure was added later, and it was the Sleeper Jewelry Store. Now it's a boutique hotel. But the black community weren't all laborers here. This gray building was the Cutler Shop. It was a dry goods store in the 1800s owned by an African American named John Cutler. He was prominent in the Republican Party and was known as the Kingmaker. He also owned a hotel in Hampton Beach, New Hampshire that hosted many presidents and other rich and famous people like P.T. Barnum. African Americans owned some of these businesses and lived above them, but they all eventually left. John Phillips was the man who founded the Phillips Exeter Academy in 1781. This town is close enough to the port of Portsmouth, New Hampshire that ship owners lived here and traded as far as the West Indies. Exeter has a Revolutionary War festival every year. The town hall was designed by a member of that prominent Gilman family and doubled as a courthouse. So there's Lady Justice. She's wearing a blindfold because it's a symbol of objectivity. She was struck by lightning many times and then destroyed by Hurricane Bob in 1991. So that's actually a reproduction of the original. This is the historic Gardner House, built in 1826. And it's a private residence that someone just bought for $350,000 last year. According to Zillow, this home has good bones but needs TLC. Very pleasant, beautiful little town. And now we head north to Maine.